Hey guys, get ready with me as I discuss the three biggest lessons I learned through self-recovery. I've been in an eating disorder for about 10 years and started recovery on my own last year in April of 2022. I've had a lot of different treatment options along the way and different resources used, but these are the lessons that I've learned so far. Lesson number one is that inpatient treatment is not what people think it is. It's not the saving grace method they think that it's going to be, and it's not some untapped resource that they feel they're missing out on, like if they're getting treatment in the community. So that's a common misconception. People who are being treated in the community and feel like they're not getting the results they want often think that inpatient care will make the biggest difference in their recovery journey and might turn things around. And often caregivers feel the same way. They kind of feel like they're at their wit's end with the resources they're being provided and the fact that it's not getting their loved one anywhere. And so the natural next step is thinking inpatient. Now, definitely from a public system perspective, unless you're willing to go private and pay for your care, and I've never experienced that, so I can't speak to that. But from a public system experience, I can tell you that inpatients is really clinical, and you're going to get a lot less of mental health care than you would in the community, and a lot less attention in that regard. So when you look at the type of people that go inpatient, it's often once they've reached a lowest in their recovery journey. So for example, someone has to be deemed either medically unstable, so a medical event has happened, maybe their blood pressure's too low, maybe they've fainted, maybe they're really dehydrated, maybe their bloods are off, could be a whole bunch of things. But that is one way that you get into inpatients in the public system. Or the other way is simply by reaching a low enough BMI, which is a very big discussion and could go on forever and ever, but that is just the way the system is based. So once you've reached a BMI that is no longer acceptable or deemed acceptable to be treated in the community, then you get sent to inpatients. Now, the attention that you get at inpatients is different than what you would get in the community, in the sense that it's clinical. It's very medical based. And yes, you do have access to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, dietitian, social worker, mental health nurses, pretty much all the time, or as often as you can, I guess. But it's not making the impact that you think it would. And honestly, by the time people get to that point where they've medically declined enough or are at a low enough BMI to be there in the first place, they're really not recovery motivated at that point. So a lot of it's just about refeeding the body, getting the nutrients you need, and then being sent home on a meal plan. What I also want to mention about this is the fact that it's really a revolving door. So what you'll find is that it's the same people going inpatient in the public system. And it's because the criteria for readmission is super strict. Like, it is very, very strict that if you're not recovering perfectly at home, or if you are not doing something that they expect you to do, if certain things shift even a little bit, they're very cautious with that, I guess for liability reasons and other reasons, but they will put you straight back onto the ward. So I experienced 8 years in inpatient treatment, not consecutively, but over an 8-year period span. And so what I found was that I could go back weeks later after admission, months later, or sometimes I even went back a year later. And it was the same people that I was seeing on that ward. Like, it was always constantly the same people going in and out of that ward. And it's because that catchment is so selective. And I know the waiting lists are longer for people who don't necessarily meet that criteria. There may be atypical experiencing people. It could just be that they're not quite at that level of medical instability. And it's a shame that all those resources go to just the same people, I guess, who are, yes, possibly in critical position, but you try the same thing over and over again, and if it's not working, its effectiveness is somewhat questionable, I guess. The next lesson that I learned was that treatment options are very much polarizing. Now, they have improved since peer and lived experience people have joined into the recovery space. And I think there's great attributes that come with that. And even the shift in dynamic between only having community treatment or having inpatient treatment, and now there's even recovery coaches available. I think that's a great step, and I really like that because the hospital model never worked for me. So it all seems like really good advancements. The issue with this is that even though there are more options available, what you'll find is that they're polarizing. So they're from one extreme to another. So if I go into the hospital system, it's going to be very similar to what you get in the community. Now, in the community, you'll get more psychological help. Whereas, like I've said, the hospital is more medical based. But at the same time, often community services are linked to a hospital and they follow the protocol of what hospitals' advice or guidelines are. So it's pretty much the same treatment. I guess it's just a little bit more flexible, and you're able to do it from home if you're getting it in the community. Otherwise, if you're inpatient, it's obviously like strictly regulated. You are watched. You are in like sleeping in the hospital or at your private facility, whatever it may be. It's just stricter conditions, but basically the same goal is happening. So you're going to be having a dietitian input. You're going to be aiming for 6 meals a day, like that kind of stuff that you see on a regular basis. Now, the things that's changed with recovery coaching is that you get a different perspective. So often they're people who have lived experience, which is very helpful because they understand like what you're going through and everything. They offer a different perspective than someone who has just studied about eating disorders. The issue I have with recovering coaching at the moment is that, first of all, you would have to be at a certain level of medical stability, and I'm thinking at a certain weight to even access someone of a recovery coach nature, just because they are not medical professionals. They cannot give medical advice, and they will not give medical advice. So basically, you have to be at a certain point in order to access them. If you're coming from a, let's say, 10-year eating disorder, you've been in hospital, you've tried everything, you're still severely malnourished, but you know going back to hospital isn't really what's going to be the most helpful outcome for you, recovery coaches probably wouldn't help you at that point. They would still suggest that you seek medical advice. And, you know, rightly so. Like I said, they're not medical professionals. They know they have to work within their scope. But it often means that whatever advice they're giving you has to be accompanied by things that a dietitian or a psychologist, psychiatrist, doctor, like the group effort. Everyone has to have an input. So, you know, you do get extra guidance in a sense, but at the same time, you're working under the same system at the end of the day. So all of it ties back to the one unified system. And that's a little bit problematic for people like me who do not feel like the system works to their needs. Now, the other thing about recovery coaching is that it's quite new. So at least in Australia, there's really only one major accreditation that you can get, and it's based on one particular model. And this model is built on the idea that in order to be recovered, you have to be like recovered plus. So it aims for an all-in experience. It means that it's going to push you to the limits of being recovered, but then also being intuitive eater, also being food freedom. It gives you the biggest spectrum for recovery, and that might work for some people, but it may not work for others as well. So there's a little bit of discrepancy there. The final thing is something that we all know, and it's the fact that recovery looks different for everyone. So my recovery and my individual needs are going to be different to someone else. What I will say is that through my recovery journey, I have learned that it's so much more than just the weight. It's so much more than the body image issues or the food itself. There's a lot of background things that may be happening that you're just not in tune. Sorry, I got cut off at the end there. But basically what I was saying is that it's just so much more than the eating, the body image, the weight itself. There's a lot of things happening in the background. And as soon as you can identify your triggers and be really reflective about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, how you're behaving, things get a lot more easier to navigate in recovery. But I'd love to hear what everyone thinks, and if anyone has any advice about how to do your makeup, because clearly I do not know how, please feel free to comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and talk soon. Bye.